Have you ever heard of a king who reigned for only 93 days? It sounds like something out of a movie, but it's a true story from the late Ottoman Empire. Today, we're diving into the tragic and fascinating life of Sultan Murad V, a ruler whose story is a whirlwind of hope, political intrigue, and personal struggle. It's a tale that reveals so much about a vast empire on the brink of change. So, who was Murad V? Born in 1840, he wasn't just another prince. From a young age, he was different. He was highly intelligent, musically gifted. He was a talented composer and pianist, and deeply interested in Western culture and ideas. Unlike many of his predecessors, he was fluent in French and read voraciously. He corresponded with European intellectuals and even had secret meetings with reform-minded thinkers within the empire. He dreamed of a different kind of Ottoman state, one that wasn't ruled by the absolute will of a single sultan, but by a constitution that protected the rights of its people. This made him a beacon of hope for a group of influential officials and intellectuals known as the Young Ottomans. They saw in him a leader who could steer the empire towards modernization and save it from its deepening crises. The mid-1870s were a desperate time for the Ottoman Empire. The economy was in shambles, the state was bankrupt, and there was widespread discontent across its vast territories. The reigning sultan, Murad's uncle Abdulaziz, was seen as despotic, extravagant, and incapable of handling the situation. The pressure was mounting. The reformists, led by powerful figures like Midhat Pasha, decided to act. In a dramatic palace coup on May 30th, 1876, Sultan Abdulaziz was deposed. The very next day, a shocked and unprepared Murad was proclaimed the 32nd Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Imagine the scene, the hopes of an entire generation of reformers resting on your shoulders. You've just been made the leader of one of the world's great empires, but under the most stressful circumstances imaginable. The deposition of his uncle was a violent and chaotic affair. Just a few days later, the deposed Sultan Abdulaziz was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The official story was suicide, but rumors of assassination were rampant. The weight of these events, combined with the immense pressure to rule, proved too much for Murad's already delicate nerves. He had always been a sensitive and anxious person, and this series of traumatic events pushed him over the edge. Sultan Murad V began showing clear signs of severe mental distress. He was reportedly gripped by paranoia, anxiety, and deep depression. He couldn't sleep, he had terrifying hallucinations, and he was often seen weeping uncontrollably. He would pace the palace halls, terrified of being assassinated, just like his uncle might have been. At a time when the empire desperately needed strong leadership to navigate its political and economic crises, its new sultan was mentally incapacitated. He was unable to attend council meetings or even deliver the traditional sword-girding ceremony, which was the equivalent of a coronation. The dream of a liberal, reformist sultan was turning into a nightmare for the very people who had put him on the throne. The government was paralyzed. The ministers who had engineered Murad's accession were now in an impossible position. How could they introduce a constitution and a parliament with a sultan who was not mentally fit to rule? The conservative factions at court, who had always opposed reform, saw their chance. They argued that Murad's condition was a sign of divine disapproval and used it to undermine the entire reformist project. The pressure on the government became immense. They needed a functioning head of state, and they needed one fast. With a heavy heart, the same ministers who had brought Murad to power, including the great reformer Midhat Pasha, made a devastating decision. After consulting with doctors who confirmed the Sultan's condition was unlikely to improve quickly, they resolved to depose him. The key player in this was Murad's own younger brother, Abdul Hamid. He promised the reformers that if he were made sultan, he would proclaim the constitution they so desired. And so on August 31st, 1876, after a reign of just 93 days, Sultan Murad V was deposed on the grounds of mental illness. He became the shortest reigning sultan in Ottoman history. His brother ascended the throne as Sultan Abdul Hamid II, and the brief, hopeful chapter of Murad's rule came to a tragic end. So what happened to Murad after he was removed from power? His brother, Abdul Hamid II, had him confined to the magnificent Chiran Palace, a stunning marble palace right on the shores of the Bosphorus. It sounds luxurious, But it was a golden cage. Murad was effectively a prisoner for the rest of his life. He lived there with his family, cut off from the outside world for nearly 28 years. Guards patrolled the palace grounds, and no one was allowed in or out without the new sultan's permission. The official narrative was that he was still unwell, a madman who couldn't be trusted. But was he? It's one of history's great what-ifs. Over time, Murad's mental health reportedly improved significantly. He resumed his passions, composing music, reading, and following world events through the few newspapers he was allowed. He was no longer the broken man he was during his 93-day reign. In fact, his supporters made several attempts to free him and restore him to the throne, believing he was the rightful, sane, and liberal ruler the empire needed. These plots were always discovered and brutally suppressed by Abdulhamid II, who lived in constant fear of his brother becoming a rallying point for opposition. Meanwhile, Abdulhamid II did initially proclaim the constitution as he had promised, ushering in the first constitutional era of the Ottoman Empire. But it was short-lived. Citing a war with Russia as a pretext, he suspended the constitution and the parliament in 1878 and ruled as an absolute autocrat for the next 30 years, a period known for its strict censorship and secret police. The dream of a liberal Ottoman state, which Murad V had embodied, was completely extinguished. Murad V died in his gilded cage at Turan Palace in 1904. He was buried quietly, without the pomp and ceremony befitting a sultan. His life story is a profound tragedy. He was a man ahead of his time, a ruler who wanted to bring freedom and modernity to his people, but was ultimately broken by the very political system he sought to change. His brief reign serves as a powerful symbol of the immense challenges facing the late Ottoman Empire, the clash between tradition and modernity, the ruthless nature of court politics, and the personal toll of power. Murad's story also forces us to think about mental health. In the 19th century, there was little understanding or sympathy for what he was going through. His illness was used as a political weapon to discredit him and his ideas. It's a sobering reminder of how personal struggles can be exploited in the high-stakes game of politics, and how easily a person's life can be defined by a moment of crisis rather than their lifelong ideals. Murad V was more than just the mad sultan. He was a dreamer, a reformer, a musician, and a man whose vision for his empire was never realized. What do you think? If Murad V had been able to overcome his personal crisis, could he have changed the course of Ottoman history? Could he have saved the empire from its eventual collapse? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and if you found this story as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more hidden histories. See you next time.